So I think we're ready to go on, and going on in line with the whole data science theme of this session, I want to give you Rebecca, who's going to talk about the fastest way to learn data science. Please give her a warm round of applause.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rebecca Vickery. I work as a data scientist for a company called Holiday Extras at the moment. Today I'm going to be giving you a talk called The Fastest Way to Learn Data Science is Not About What You Know, It's About What You Can Do. So over the last few years, I've transitioned from a career as a data analyst to a career as a data scientist. And along the way, I've picked up some really good techniques to accelerate my learning, so I wanted to share those with you today. So I'm going to be covering 4 things. I'm going to start by giving you some information about my background and my own journey. I'm going to talk a lot about motivation and how to keep momentum when learning, particularly why that's important when learning data science. I'm going to talk about how to learn and introduce you to my own framework that I use for learning data science. And then I'm going to introduce you to 5 really good habits that I found that when I fostered them, they really helped to accelerate the pace of my learning. So to start with, I'll just talk through my own background. So I've got a life sciences background. I've dabbled a little bit in web development. That's where I first started to learn programming. I've had a variety of different data and analytics roles over the last few years. And then now, currently, I work as a data scientist. So just to put some kind of dates around some of those key areas around my career, my first ever data role was in around about 2007. Around 2015 was when I first started to learn Python, and that was towards a career as a data scientist. But it wasn't until 2017 that I started to put in place some of the techniques I'm going to talk through today, which really accelerated my learning. And then early this year, I got my first role as data scientist. So to start with, in the first section, I'm going to talk all about kind of goals and why they're really important in learning data science. So before I get too into actually how to do that and how to set the goals, I'm going to talk about why I think goals are particularly important when learning data science. So data science is a very, very broad area. So this is the job search I did back in July, and this is just a snapshot of roles. As you can see, there are lots of different roles. They all sort of pretty much fall under the data science umbrella, but they all require a fairly different sort of set of skills. So as you'd expect, the skills required to become a data scientist, if you Google this, you'll find that they're really extensive, very broad. In fact, pretty much most areas on this diagram in themselves could be their own discipline. So it's very easy when you first start to look at learning data science to get really overwhelmed and really lost and to not know where to start, and also at various points to feel like, wow, there's so much to learn, I don't think I'm ever going to get there. And I certainly felt like that when I was learning. So I think it's really important to set goals to be able to focus down on exactly what you need to learn for your own goals. So the first thing you need to do is set a big goal. And for data science, what I like to think of this as is a purpose more than a goal. So I like to think of it, I think it's really important to think about what you want to do rather than what you want to be. So rather than just a job title, because of course the area of data science and technology and everything is changing all the time. And so rather than just thinking about it as a job title, I think it's really important to think about what it is that you really want to do. And it needs to be something that you're really passionate about, and you've got kind of an emotional connection with, because that will really help to keep you motivated while you're learning. So when I first started learning, my goal was to become a data scientist, so I did have that as my goal. But it was along the journey of me learning that I realised that actually that wasn't as meaningful to me at all. Being a data scientist actually in itself didn't mean that much, but actually my goal became to make a positive impact with data. And for me, I wanted to make an impact as soon as possible and as quickly as possible. So my learning became much more focused on kind of the applied side of data science. If I had a different goal, it might have been focused more on maybe a research data scientist position, in which case the skills that I needed to learn would be quite different. So this helped to focus down on exactly what I needed to learn for my own career. So then obviously with that big goal that you've got, that might take years to get to. And in fact, for example, for me, I'm still not there. I've still got lots more to learn. So it's really important to keep motivated, to have smaller goals as well. But the really important thing is they need to be strictly relevant to your big goals. So you need to make sure that they are always helping you towards that bigger goal. So you set your smaller goals. Again, they should be around what are they going to enable you to do so that they can be really measurable, so that you can say, I couldn't do this before, I've done this thing, and now I can do that. So that in that sense, they'll be measurable. And it's a really good idea to set deadlines around your smaller goals as well to keep that momentum in your learning. One of the things I found to be really useful when I was learning data science was to create my own roadmap. So what this meant was I had this list of skills that were, again, directly relevant to both the smaller goals and the bigger goals that I had. And it meant that if I had any time at all to learn, if I had half an hour here, an hour there, it meant that instead of having to spend any time thinking, oh, what am I going to learn today, I could just pick something from my roadmap and start learning. I also found it was a really useful way of reviewing my progress. And the other thing that I think is really important is to celebrate your successes. So by having the roadmap, I could see how I was progressing, and I could see what, say, 6 months ago I couldn't do, and then now I can do those things. And I would pause and take time to kind of really celebrate that and to appreciate what I've learned, because there are times, even now, I still feel like I've got all this other stuff still to learn. So it's a really good idea to do that. So this is what my roadmap looked like. This is just a snapshot of it. There's a lot more skills on it than this, really. I'm quite an efficient person. I don't like to do anything that's unnecessary, so it's not particularly sophisticated. It's just a Google Doc. What that means is that it's always available to me. It's really easy for me to add new skills onto it if I need to. It's literally just a list of skills. I've got kind of a scoring system in here. And what I would do is at the beginning of every month, I would create a new copy of this sheet. I would put a few goals at the top, which were my small goals for that month that I wanted to achieve. Then what I would do is whenever I had some time to learn, I could just pick a goal from that list, and I could pick some skills from the list, could learn them, and then I would score myself again. So then at the end of the month, I would review my progress. And it was also really useful because I could look back, say, 6 months and see how I'd progressed. So when do you start? Do you start when you've got your roadmap, when you've set your goals, when you've set your smaller goals? Well, I think the important thing is just to start now. All of these other things can be shaped as you go along. Certainly with my roadmap, I was adding skills to that all the time and developing it. But I think it's really important for sort of keeping motivated in learning is just to make a start, just to take a step towards that and then develop those things as you go. So in the next step, the next section, what I'm going to talk about is how to learn. So I'm a real fan of the practical first learning. So I'm going to sort of introduce you to my framework that I use for learning. I still use that today, and some really good resources for learning data science. So this is my learning framework. So in essence, what I do is I learn just enough to be able to build something, and it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to work. And then I explain it back in some way. And by explaining it back, what that means is that I fill in some of those knowledge gaps. I improve the knowledge that I've got from building something, because when you explain it to somebody, you have to kind of, do a little bit more research and understand it a bit better to be able to explain it to someone. And what it also did was highlighted things that I didn't know. So then what I could do is I could go into continue in the cycle, learn some more, and then go on to build better things. And I still use this learning framework today. So I used it at the beginning of this year. I wanted to learn natural language processing with Python. So that's what I did. I went away, I took some data sets, did some tutorials, looked at some libraries, built a model that worked, and then I wrote a Medium article. I write quite a lot on Medium. I wrote a Medium article about it. I had to do a bit of research for the article, and then I went back and I learned some more. So where should you learn is what I'm going to talk about next. So I'm a real believer that you should create your own curriculum for data science. So everybody that's coming into data science is going to have a background. So you might be coming into it from previously being something like a software engineer, or maybe you've got an advanced maths degree. So in which case you would already have that sort of part of the knowledge. So a lot of the large sort of courses online are more broad and they cover lots of different areas. So I really believe that you should just sort of create your own tailored curriculum. So as I said, there are lots of big data science courses out there, but they are generally fairly broad. And they are really, really good, but they quite often, they don't focus so much on the practical always, sometimes they're quite heavy on theory. So what I think, and especially because a lot of these courses now are moving more towards sort of monthly subscription-based models for their pricing, rather than a one-off fee, what I sort of suggest is just picking and choosing from the courses the bits that are most relevant to you, rather than completing the course for the sake of getting a certificate. And I really think that when it comes to kind of applying for job roles, that it's much more impressive to have a portfolio of practical projects to showcase, rather than just certificates that potentially thousands of other people have as well. There's one exception to the online courses that I found to be absolutely fantastic, and that's DataQuest. Has anyone heard of DataQuest before, or maybe done it? No. So this is a brilliant course. So it's an entire learning path for data science. I picked quite a lot of stuff up here from my roadmap. It's all practical learning, so it's all in-browser coding all the way through. But even with this course, I still skipped over some bits. So for example, there's an SQL section in this course. I, obviously having a data analyst background, already had SQL skills, so I kind of skipped over that. So even with this course, I didn't do the whole thing. So then, of course, the other thing is the internet is vast. There are loads and loads of resources out there for learning data science. A huge amount of them are free, so it really doesn't have to cost a lot of money to learn. Places like Medium for tutorials and articles on data science. Twitter, there are loads of great people to follow on Twitter who tweet out things like course recommendations and book recommendations and tips and things like that. There's GitHub repos, there's the open source libraries, like particularly Python libraries like Pandas and Scikit-learn. In their documentation, they have some fantastic tutorials. So there's loads of different resources out there that you can pick from for your curriculum. And then finally, the last part of one of the other parts of the model is about how to build something and to put your sort of learning into practice as quickly as possible. So I'm going to just talk through briefly some areas where you can do that. So one area are data science competitions. So generally speaking, there are a number of different sites that have these. They basically give you a data set, a data problem to solve, and they have a leaderboard. And the great thing about this is when you upload your solution to them, you get a ranking. And what I did with these was, rather than using them as I wanted to win the competition, it was much more about seeing where I ranked on the leaderboard, so I knew how much more I might potentially have to learn. So it's a really good way, I found, of sort of benchmarking myself. And then there's the UCI Machine Learning repository, which is a really good resource for data sets. So on here there are thousands of free, open data sets for building data science models and doing data analysis. There's models of every kind on here, so you can take some data and go and create your own sort of data project from these. So that's really great. And then, of course, there's contributing to open source is another good way of getting experience. Again, Python has some fantastic data science libraries out there. NumFocus is just one organisation that I'm particularly aware of. There's also charities that connect data scientists with social problems. DataKind is a good example of that as well. So they're all really good places to look for getting that practical experience. And then the last part of my framework was about explaining. Where can you explain? So I personally write a lot on Medium, but you can also have, of course, your own blog, like WordPress or something. I also talk a lot at conferences and meetups. It's one of the reasons why I'm here today, basically to share my knowledge and also to do that explain process. Or if you're not comfortable with sharing something publicly, then that's fine. You can always just write it down, or you might find a friend or a colleague who's interested who you could explain it to. Okay, so in the last section, I'm just going to talk through my 5 habits that I found that if you foster them, they really help to accelerate your learning and to make your learning much more efficient. So the first thing is about staying uncomfortable. So with this, what I really believe is that it's very easy to fall into a sort of pattern of staying where you feel comfortable, so continuing to learn the things you already know. And in particular, when you're learning something technical, it can be quite challenging when you first start learning something new and you feel uncomfortable. So my advice is to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, and to always make sure that you are slightly uncomfortable in your learning, because at that point you'll be learning the most at that time. And the other thing is about rest periods. So just like athletes build rest periods into their training schedules, because they know that that is when their muscles kind of repair themselves and strengthen, and also that if they don't have rest periods, then their performance declines. I really believe this is the same for learning. When I was learning data science, I had a full-time job and I had 2 young children. So my learning was mainly in the evenings and weekends and around those kind of other commitments. And so what I tried to do was, and I still try to do this now, although I don't always manage it, is I try to keep Friday and Saturday evenings free and don't work or study on those days, and it just gives me that period of rest, and I think it's really important. And of course the other thing is obviously looking after yourself, staying healthy is really important as well. And then when I was learning data science, I had 2 fantastic data scientists as mentors. I was very lucky to have them. They were fantastic. They gave me feedback on things like my roadmap, on like what I should learn. They also really helped to give me feedback on things like code, like I would send them pieces of my code and things like that. It was really, really useful to me. And I couldn't have got potentially where I am without mentors. So I really advise seeking mentors, and I try and seek mentors for everything. I have one for public speaking and things like that. And there are lots of places you might be able to find mentors, so you might be lucky enough to have colleagues at your place of work. You might find them on Twitter or LinkedIn. You might find them when you're networking at conferences like this one here. And then the other thing that I would say is master communications. That's a really important thing, both in learning data science and also if you become a data scientist. So in terms of learning data science, I've sort of talked through the explain path model, which I think is a really important way of learning. So I really believe that by mastering that communication, you can do more of that explaining and learn more. And then also, of course, in terms of finding mentors and things, it helps you to network better and to find those mentors. And then if you do become a data scientist, you'll find that you need communication skills massively, because in data science, when you're working as a data scientist, you'll have to communicate things, complex models and things, to people who might not necessarily be technical. You'll have to be able to tell data stories and all those kind of things. So communication skills are really, really important. And then the last habit is just about pay it forward. So in helping others effectively. So helping others is in essence a brilliant way of learning. In the sense, I've already talked about in the framework, sort of explaining it back to somebody can really help you. Also, if you help others, you'll find that at some point that they might help you as well. So you can sort of develop those mutually beneficial relationships. So the fastest way to learn data science is to make sure that you set goals, and those goals need to be more about what you want to do rather than what you want to be. Use the framework, so you learn just enough to build something. Build something, doesn't have to be perfect, just has to work. Explain it back to somebody, learn some more, and then build better things. And finally, foster the 5 habits because they will really help to accelerate your learning. And I really think that in particular with data science, it really is much more about what you're able to do, and it's really important to concentrate more on what you can do rather than what you know. So that's everything. Thank you very much for listening. If anyone's interested, this actually started as a blog on Medium, so if anyone wants to read that, it's on my Medium account. I'm probably going to tweet out the slides from this and also a version of my roadmap over the next couple of days. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, hopefully you'll see those. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very, very interesting framework to, find out which is your own way in data science. We have a couple of minutes left for questions. So if anybody here has a question they want to ask, there we go.
Thanks for that really, really good talk. One thing that I found particularly difficult in sort of self-educating technology is often knowing what you don't know and what you need to learn. Have you got any more thoughts on how you go about building a roadmap and knowing what needs to be on it?
Yeah, so I think I think a lot of it is develops as you go along in your learning. I think definitely for me that was the case. So I think that I think the best thing to do is to start with the goal. So just to start with what it is exactly that you want to do. So what type of data scientist do you want to be? That'll help to narrow the skills down straight away. So if you start to think really about what it is you're going to be doing, if you have that particular type of role, then that should hopefully inform kind of the skills that you need. And generally speaking, yeah, there's lots of stuff on the internet out there that you'll probably be able to find out in relation to that, like looking at job descriptions and things like that for those things. But I would say, yeah, definitely it's that goal setting that's really important to actually really drill down into what it is that you actually want to do first, I think. Does that answer your question all right? Thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions? We still have a bit? No? Oh, there we go.
Thanks for that talk, it's really interesting. Well, I wondered about having a mentor. What were some of the useful things that you found from having a mentor? What were some of the best ways they could help you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I found that there were things that the way I see it is I didn't obviously do formal education in data science. So in formal education, you'd have a teacher and you would be able to, you'd get feedback on your work and how you were doing. And particularly in terms of writing code, writing good quality code, it's so important to have that feedback. And I think that was probably the main thing, was being able to send them, because that's what I would do. I'd send them some code and they would sort of tell me what not necessarily what I was doing wrong, but what I could do better. And I think it is that just that getting feedback on your work, and also things like, again, when I was developing out my roadmap, I could sort of send that to them and they might say, oh, actually, I think you should add these skills. So I think it is just that if you're self-educating, is obviously you're missing that kind of having a teacher or a tutor who would normally give you feedback. So I think that's where it's really, really valuable, I think.
Right. One last question, yeah.
Hello, thank you very much for the talk. It was really great to see something so encouraging for people wanting to learn themselves. What I wanted to know is, how flexible did you need to be in order to avoid burning out? You mentioned not working Fridays and Saturdays, but were there also times when you thought, oh, this is a rubbish day, I just need, I need a long bath and to chill out for the evening? Did that help you as well, or were you really fixed in your approach?
No, not at all. No, I wasn't. I wouldn't say I'm really fixed on those days. I sort of almost schedule those in to make sure that I do have that downtime, because obviously sometimes it's easy not to just miss it completely. But definitely there were still days when, yeah, like you say, I would have a bad day and I just would not do the work. And one of the things I find that I have to be quite strict with myself on is things like doing other things, like getting enough exercise and things like that. So sometimes if I had a bad day, I'd say, no, I'm going to go out for a run or something instead of doing work. So no, definitely I had a lot of flexibility, but it was more about scheduling in time so that I definitely took that time anyway, so if that makes sense.
Right, thank you. I think we're good in terms of questions. So give a warm round of applause again. Thank you very much for your talk.